There's a message here about unmuting the computer. All righty. Ignore the computer. I was invited to present today in honor of May Day and the Day of the Worker. The first question I have, and it's interesting because it was alluded to May 1st as a day of awakening, etc. But so I still ask why May 1st is the day. So what is it about May 1 that has inspired humanity to behave differently from other days of the year? Is there something in our development over the centuries that would impel this desire to change the order of things, that would make a more equitable world more conceivable? It's said that the modern movement for the 8-hour workday and for the 40-hour work week originated during the Industrial Revolution in 19th century Britain, where industrial production in large factories transformed working life. At that time, the workday could range from 10 to 16 hours. The work week was typically 6 days, and child labor was common. But historical record tells us that May Day, Workers' Day, began on the North American continent. Was there something here that moved the needle in labor rights? The author of Gotham, A History of New York from its founding to 1898, Mike Wallace, narrates the activities of the Dutch and English in those early years when, during Pentecost, which falls 49 days after Easter on May 16th in then New Netherlands, in the mid-17th century, the town's sailors and laborers and servants cavorted in the marketplace. They were following traditions that they brought with them from the Germanic cultures of their northern European origins. Astronomy and ancient agrarian practices influenced. Halfway between the northern hemisphere's spring equinox, March 20th, and the midsummer solstice, June 20th or 21st, lies May Day. With its natural rhythms and disrespect for societal norms, much to the discomfort of the then governor of New York, Stuyvesant, the normal order of things fell away. May Day's ancient underpinnings can be seen in celebrations which may resemble in many ways a Roman bacchanalia or Dionysian rites of revelry, the unbridled abandon and coming of age of young Roman men, the social disorder, which included nighttime revelry mixing of Roman citizens and liberal consumption of wine, does resemble the disorder which disturbed the political powers of New Amsterdam. We're not talking about the TV series here. Some other medieval festivities held the night before May Day, known as May Eve, included gathering green branches and wildflowers to decorate buildings, make into wreaths, crowning a May Queen, sometimes with a male companion decked in greenery, setting up a maypole, a May tree, or a May bush, around which people danced and sang, as well as parades, processions involving these. But it is a challenge to connect ancient pagan rites to the eruption experienced in Haymarket Square in 1886 Chicago. There were earlier efforts to demand workers' rights before the Haymarket affair. Labor celebration days existed in some European countries since the end of the 18th century. Sometimes on January 20th in France, for example, in 1793. Sometimes on June 5th in France in 1867. On April 21st, 1856, the Australian stonemasons of Victoria undertook a mass stoppage as part of the 8-hour workday movement. It became a yearly commemoration inspiring American workers to have their first work stoppage. In 1886, beginning on May 1st, there was a general strike for the 8-hour workday at the McCormick Reaper factory in Chicago. It involved 500 workers. That first strike resulted in police violence that caused injuries and 1 death. Subsequently, on May 4th, the police acted to disperse an assembly in support of the strike, where the anarchist August Spies spoke, urging the union members to remain united. When an unidentified person threw a bomb, the police responded by firing on the workers. 3 years later, 1889, the first meeting of the Second Socialist International was held in Paris, following a proposal by the syndicalist Ramon Lavin that called for international demonstrations on the 1890 anniversary of the Chicago protests. May 1st was chosen by the International Workers' Day, and to commemorate that day, the 1886 Haymarket Affair in Chicago. On May 1st, 1890, demonstrations took place in the United States and most countries in Europe. Demonstrations were also held in Chile and Peru. International Workers' Day was formally recognized as an annual event at the International's Second Congress in 1891. What became known as the Haymarket Affair led to the deaths of 7 police officers and at least 4 civilians. 60 police officers were injured, as were 115 civilians. Hundreds of labor leaders and sympathizers were later rounded up, and 4 were executed by hanging, after a trial that was determined a miscarriage of justice. It found them guilty of accessory to murder. Irregularities included in the trial. Irregularities included a hand-picked jury. The defense was prohibited from presenting evidence or cross-examining witnesses, etc., etc. The intentions of this faux legal exercise were transparent if we listen to the closing remarks of the prosecuting attorney, Cook County's D.A. Grinnell. Quote, "Law is on trial. Anarchy is on trial. These men have been selected, picked out by the grand jury, and indicted because they were leaders. There are no more guilty than the thousands who follow them. Gentlemen of the jury, convict these men, make examples of them, hang them, and you save our institutions, our society," end quote. In his short 4-page article, written clearly as a pedagogical tool the year after the Haymarket Affair, the anarchist historian Dyer Loom stated that the victims of this miscarriage of justice, Adolf Fischer, George Engel, Michael Schwab, Louis Ling, Oscar Neebe, were all found guilty of accessories to murder, but their true crime was trying to force a change in a cruel, classist society. And we must remember that the 1886 Haymarket Affair occurred at the peak of what 1920s historians ironically coined the Gilded Age, after the Mark Twain novel of the same title. In the U.S. then, much like today, foreigners were viewed with suspicion. Their organizing techniques were troublesome for the power structure. And the labor organizer Joe Hill is an example, whose real name was Joel Emanuel Haglund, a cartoonist and songwriter and member of the World Organization of Workers, or Wobblies. He was also killed, but in this case by firing squad, in Salt Lake City's Sugar House prison, falsely accused of murder and sedition, much like the Haymarket Five, and leading up to U.S. involvement in World War I. Subsequently, the May Day riots of 1894 occurred. The International Socialist Congress in Amsterdam in 1904 called on all Social Democratic Party organizations and trade unions of all countries to demonstrate energetically on the 1st of May for the legal establishment of the 8-hour day, for the class demands of the proletariat, and for universal peace. Remember, one of their major asks was for universal peace. The Congress made it mandatory upon the proletarian organizations of all countries to stop work on May 1st, wherever it is possible without injury to workers. We can ask ourselves, if in our time, in the state of Colorado, if the 8-hour workday is a legally recognized right. In a recent article, in the Colorado Sun, the question of whether labor rights are respected in Colorado, being we are in a modified right to work state, that's in quotes, which is a result of the 1943 Peace Act. The Peace Act creates an almost insurmountable obstacle to union organizing. Quote from the article in the Colorado Sun, the Peace Act's rules require that on a work site, the election for union representation, the National Labor, NLRB, I'm blanking on, the National Labor, there you go, that the vote be passed by a mere simple majority, the first vote. However, in Colorado, the second vote is required, and the second vote requires that 3/4 of eligible workers vote in favor. Without it, the union has less bite, since it doesn't represent all eligible workers and cannot collect dues from those who don't join. End of quote. Union organizing is an uphill battle in Colorado. That is due to the fact that Coloradans, like all Americans, are subject to intense propaganda built on American exceptionalism. And the well-worn national characterization of rugged individualism in opposition to what is often attributed to more primitive, air quotes please, more primitive cultures, less developed than ours. Those other cultures are characterized as collectivist. These ingrained attitudes are manifest in many ways. In our means of transportation, in our love of weapons, in our insistence on ever larger living spaces to separate us from our neighbors, etc., etc. The 19th century anarchist Dyer Lum phrased as heresy the social beliefs that motivated the Haymarket strike and affair. Those thoughts were perceived in the United States as heretical. Lum asserts, are now and were then vigorously denounced by the social ethos of most Americans. Quote, society today, 1 year after the Haymarket affair, 1887, as in the past centuries, can rely on a horde of hirelings to relentlessly pursue and vilify and punish the heretic who dares to question and resist the existing order of things. End quote. The American Gilded Age capitalists were so shaken by the Haymarket affair that President Grover Cleveland signed the bill that instituted Labor Day to neutralize the power of May 1st. Cleveland feared that commemorating Labor Day on May 1st would become an opportunity to commemorate the riots. Thus, he moved in 1887 to support the Labor Day that the anti-anarchist union, the Knights of Labor, supported here in the United States. Consequently, we U.S. citizens have, by design, been separated from the rest of the planet in honoring the events that happened on our own soil. In the United States and Canada, the official holiday for workers is Labor Day on the first Monday of September. But at what cost do we allow attitudes like distrust of foreigners, admiration of wealth, even in excess, individualism, to the point that our society suffers one of the world's highest rates of suicide? When will we recognize the harm that these attitudes cause us? Mere days ago, in the Colorado State House, our representatives and our senator all voted in favor of SB 26-121 to require an agricultural worker to work 2 additional days a week from 48 hours passed in 2021 to 56 hours a week before he or she is entitled to earn overtime. It was 140 years ago this year that the workers in Haymarket struck the McCormick plant in Chicago for an 8-hour workday. Should we accept such abusive laws in our culture? Is our culture so blind and unwilling to change our policies for more humane ones? But in Chicago in 1886, the workers were not only striking for 8-hour workday, but also for world peace. They recognized that world peace and working people's rights are tightly connected. Wars, if we consider their outcomes, are by any sane analysis lunacy. They are infernal confabulations of bureaucrats, politicians, industrial corporate heads, desiring to derive monetary benefits from stockholders in a system which churns out funding from a political process that's manipulated by powerful media and playing on the xenophobia and fears of a propagandized population. Since the early 2000s, Congress appropriated $1.5 trillion to the Department of Defense after 9/11 for the war on terror, and later overseas contingency operations, the OCO, in Iraq, Afghanistan, Asia, Africa, and literally throughout the world. In this context, this endless war has resulted in the deaths of 4.5 to 4.6 million people, 937,000 direct deaths, including 387,000 civilian deaths. And as a result of this war on terror, 38 million people have been displaced. Theaters of war include Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, Somalia, Syria, Yemen, and now Iran and Gaza. This doesn't account for the tens of thousands of U.S. military that are fallen and suffering trauma. Working people, in other words, 99% of the world's population, desire peace, a clean environment, adequate healthcare systems, educational systems, and a future for their children. This begins with the 8-day work week. In our country, have we accomplished an 8-day work week after 140 years since the Haymarket event? According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, U.S. women work an average of 8.32 hours a day, and men work 8.4 hours per day. There's much work left for us. Let us imitate the examples of those courageous leaders who have worked and are still working to change our society for the better. Thank you.